Hello, my name's James Neal. I'm your host today. I'm going to be very quick because we need to get on to the main point, but welcome to the lunch hour lecture. Very pleased today to have Professor Catherine Riley here from UCL's Institute of Education. She is a professor of urban education, and she brings a wealth of experience, having practiced as a teacher, having been, I guess, a kind of researcher or consultant for august institutions like the World Bank, but also having a great deal of experience at every level of this particular topic. So without any more ado, I should mention, though, if you are watching at home and you want to tweet us a question, the UCL hashtag is there. We won't be able to use Slido today, I'm afraid, because of a technical hitch, so address all questions to the Twitter address that you see there. Thank you, Catherine.
Well, first of all, welcome. Welcome to those of you here in London, and for those of you who are watching online, just to say we do actually have real people, a live audience, and we may even get them to make a bit of noise to prove that they're here. And I know that there are people who are logging in from many different parts of the globe, certainly Australia and Jamaica and the States and the Netherlands and hopefully a few other places as well. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. My starting point may seem a bit unusual, and it's this. We live in a world of rage and untruth, a world on the move, a world where half the world's refugees are children. Social divisions are widening, but it's also a world of hope and possibilities, and a world in which we all want to feel that we belong. And belonging is that sense of being somewhere where you feel comfortable and that you fit in and safe in your identity. And my starting point is this, that schools are one of the few shared social institutions where children and young people can feel they belong or can feel excluded. So the question at the heart of my presentation is this. Are we getting the leaders that we really need to head up our schools? And I come to that question for three particular reasons. The first is some of the rather gloomy statistics that are in the air at the moment. An increase in hate crimes post-Brexit, which led to this newspaper headline, is Britain becoming a nastier place? An increase in teachers quitting the classroom, with something like 1 in 3 leaving within 5 years of qualifying, which made you think, what's going on in our schools? And a rise in the number of children who are self-harming. And health experts have put that down to a range of things, including body image, fears of abuse, but also to some of the pressures from schools. Very recently, an international study on children's well-being found that 1 in 5 children were pretty unhappy in school. 1 in 3 reported having been bullied physically or emotionally. And this led the National Children's Society, and I quote, to say, schools need to be safe havens, not battlegrounds. Very interesting. Schools need to be safe havens, not battlegrounds. So my second reason for coming to this topic is about an unease that I have about what I call the resurgence of the superhead. Now, do you know the superhead? You know, the superhead is the one that goes in, there is this failing school, and the superhead comes in and almost overnight turns everything round, climbs this Kilimanjaro on their own without oxygen, seeming to do wondrous things. And I don't think it's quite like that. So I came across a wonderful piece of research very recently from the Center for High Performance. It was in the Harvard Educational Review. So what they did, they studied 400 school leaders from here in the UK. What did they do over a 3-year period? What did they do? What did they say they do? And what happened when they left? Because I think that's another really interesting thing. And what they said was that the rewards all went to a group of school leaders that they call surgeons. Now, surgeons have an absolute focus on test results. So what do these surgeons do? Well, the evidence is that because of this focus, the surgeons excluded, on average, between 1 in 4 students in their final year. They got rid of 1 in 10 teachers. This was the surgeon approach. And although the gains were there in the short term, they didn't last. The draconian measures don't last. But yet, these superheads are the high-profile ones, and they're rewarded, again in the research, in terms of money, in terms of honours from the Queen. But at what a cost to the excluded? And the researchers concluded, and I quote here, that the UK, it's a really interesting quote, was appointing, rewarding, and recognising the wrong kind of leaders. Now, looking around the room, do any of you recognise the story? Do you know any of these superheads? Nobody know anyone? No? You see the story? Possibly, say people here in the audience. But when I looked at that research, it took me back to some research I did some years ago when I was looking more broadly at leadership. And I interviewed very senior people at Shrivenham, and that's the UK's Defence Academy, if you've never heard of it. So I wanted to know what were their views about leadership. Now, they were very exercised with the notion of toxic leadership. Because you think about that in military terms. If you have a toxic leader, think of the harm that that person can do. So that was their particular focus. So I think we have a real issue today because we have a global climate in which toxic leadership in different forms seems to have taken center stage. And it seems to me we have to be very, very mindful of the children, the young people, and the adults in our schools. Stephen Ball, my colleague from the Institute, talks about a growing culture of what he calls survivalism, self-interest, which pits schools against each other. Huge pressures are put on school leaders to perform. Some of them put excessive, I don't mean there shouldn't be any pressures and encouragement, excessive pressures on teachers and on young people. So that poses for me the question, are we rewarding the right kinds of leaders? I think it's a really important issue. And it takes me then into my third reason for looking at this topic. And it's about belonging. As I've already said, we live in this very difficult, very complex world. And it's a world in which we all struggle to feel that we belong. And this push to survivalism, the cult of survivalism excludes people. It creates outsiders. So for me, my focus has been on place and belonging and the importance of this in our volatile and global world and what that means for the children and young people. So in my last book, which is called Leadership of Place, Stories from the US, UK, and South Africa, I looked at the experience of over 100 children in those different countries. And I asked them, some of my students will know this because I'm always going on about these questions. I asked them 2 questions. What's it like living around here? And what's it like being in this school? And what you see is that for many children and young people in our urban communities, in our challenging communities, life has many competing realities. Places that are safe, places that are positive, others that are really, really difficult. So these first 2 slides I've just shown are from the UK. But when you look elsewhere, this one here is from South Africa. And the issues in a local community in the Eastern Cape. This one here, because I did further work in Chile and then Jamaica. This is from Chile. Children solo feeling that they're alone. This is the reality for some children, young people. This one here is from Jamaica. A child drawing how it felt for him. Hey boy, come here. How he felt when he was walking down the streets. But there is the school. A place of belonging, a place of importance. And then here is what schools can be. I particularly love this drawing because it was drawn by a child in a school in Manchester, and that happens to be my city. So I really like this. But what a wonderful school, you could see how this child has drawn the school as a place of belonging. But across all of those countries, what you see is children's hopes and dreams and aspirations, which is why the schools are so important and which is why the leaders are so important. So the work in Leadership of Place also identified a cohort of place leaders, as I call them, who sought to bring, to understand young people's lives and experiences and connect to the wider archipelago of communities. And the potential for school leaders, particularly in those really, really challenging contexts, to make a difference was absolutely inspiring because it sprang from a belief about a sense of possibilities, a belief on the part of the school leader that in partnership with the communities, things could be different. So place and belonging really matter today. Over half a century ago, the French philosopher Simone Weil captured the importance of being rooted and connected. And I'm just going to read a quote from hers because I think it is so apposite. To be rooted is perhaps the most important and least recognized need of the human soul. Uprootedness is by far the most dangerous malady to which societies are exposed. It's such a powerful quote, and her prescient message, I think, echoes down the decades. And in our volatile world, there is an immediacy and an urgency to what she's saying, to the issues that she raises about place and belonging and what that actually means. Now, I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to almost press the pause button. Again, some of my students will have done this, but I'm going to ask you to do this again. I am going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment. So whether you're here in the lecture room in the Darwin Theatre, or you are in Australia or America or Jamaica or the Netherlands, just close your eyes for a moment. Close your eyes. Nothing terrible is going to happen to you, I hope. I don't think so. So take your mind back. Take your mind back to your own school days. Think about the teachers, those who inspired you. I learned to love mathematics because. Those who traumatized you. I never thought I could add up because. Think of the classmates whose company you sought or avoided. So the question for you is, were you the insider or an outsider? Did you feel that you belonged? Was school a place for you or not? Now you can open your eyes. Now we're going to take a quick vote here. In school, hands up if you felt you were a real insider. Put your hand up and you really belonged. Well, audience, that's well over 2/3 of the room. The rest of you, did the rest of you feel on the periphery? Were you outsiders? Put your hands up. Wow, quite a big group here. Okay. But we all carry that experience of school and of how we felt in school. That is our experience. Understanding our own experience, whether we were the insiders or outsiders, is really, really important. So the outsiders, it could have been pretty grim. But if you felt that you belonged, think how good that was. And think how we need to be creating that for our children and young people. And think too about the importance of school as a place of belonging, as shown here. This is just from a workshop that I did with some teachers. Think of school as a place, because the notion of place is a really powerful one. The place where we're from, the place where we live, the place that we'd like to be. I do this if I was running a workshop. I'd say, you know, where are you from? And I do my bit and say, well, I live in London, but I'm from Manchester. And as my friend Bernadette, who's sitting here, because we know the conversation, I would then go and say, yes, but who's your tribe? Well, they are, you know, Lancashire, Irish, Lithuanian, Jewish, you know, supported, united, etc. We all have those things that we carry with us. We all want to be seen for who we are. That sense of belonging is really important. And when we think about schools, every child, every young person, every adult who walks through the school gates takes their own story into the life of the school. And so schools become this wonderful kaleidoscope, ever-changing kaleidoscope of people and ideas and attitudes, and that have the potential to coalesce around shared beliefs and attitudes. They are one of the few places of stability for many of our children or young people. Now, in my most recent research, which is a wonderful project, which we call School, a Place Where We Belong, we worked, so the team from the Iowa UCL, we worked with schools, group of schools. We train young people to be teacher researchers. We train newly qualified, young people to be student researchers. We train teachers who are newly qualified teachers to be teacher researchers. We work with the school leaders. We learned a huge amount about place and belonging, but what we also learned was this, that if you involve teachers and young people in working together in a process of collaborative inquiry, it unleashes their creativity and their energy. And once teachers and young people discover that what they do really matters, it creates a process of engagement, it creates a sense of agency. And you can see all of that on the 5 videos. I'm going to show you a little link to one of the 5 videos that we've linked to the project. So we call these 5 videos the Art of Possibilities series. However, and so this is our lovely question, isn't it? You know, is our school a place where everybody feels they belong? And if not, what we're going to do about it? I think this is the most brilliant research question. And it's not that I invented it. It was a collective thing, but it really takes you into such interesting places. But when we go to today's educational landscape, we see something else. Personally, I see lots of leaders who are committed, love the children, but there's this kind of hesitancy. There's an uncertainty. The lexicon of problems and uncertainties creates a kind of stagnation, a set of worries. The pervasive cult of survivalism gets in the way. And weighed down by the growing demands of government and an ongoing prospect of diminishing budgets, the idea, the notion that you might step into a completely different leadership space is something that is alien. It's on a distant horizon. It doesn't really exist. And yet, it seems to me, in this global climate in which the success of schools is judged increasingly on a very narrow range of test results, we seem to have forgotten that children, just like us, want to be known and seen for who we are. And it seems to me that if that thought had entered the minds of the politicians who made the decisions in our recent budget, we probably would have had a very different set of financial and policy priorities. So the question becomes this: what kind of leaders do we want and need? And of course, there also is a question about how we get them. School leaders. Well, let me just tell you let me just set it in a context. So let me paraphrase it in terms of the words of Pierre Bourdieu. How equipped, this is the question I think, how equipped are the leaders that we have to create the kinds of social spaces in which children, young people and adults feel they belong? I think this is something that should very much be in our mind. Because leaders are really important. How they think, decide, act, reflect, draw on that knowledge, create a roadmap of possibilities is absolutely critical to the well-being of children and adults and their sense of well-being, belonging and agency. I love this one. I know there's a spelling mistake in it, but I love the notion. You read a book about being a head teacher, you do an exam in kindness. I just rather like that as a concept. Leaders' aspirations and practices shape young people's beliefs about themselves and send messages to communities about how they're viewed. Their expectations set the professional agenda. And how leaders do that is absolutely important. This is where the concept, the notion of agency is absolutely critical. Some of you will have read the work of Anthony Giddens, who was one of perhaps the first sociologists to really use this concept in a deep way. And he defines agency as, quote, an ability to intervene in the world to make a difference. Now, the New York Times is definitely on the case with this, because the headline only this week says, want to fix schools? Go to the principal's office. And it's really quite a fun article. But none of this is easy. In the uncertain world, the volatile world, where the demands on schools are growing, leaders find themselves holding the ring between competing truths and realities. Global challenges, national demands, local pressures, all put school leaders to the test, all push their values and beliefs, and appreciating difference, welcoming communities, creating inclusive schools, and also responding to the prevent agenda. That is some tough challenge that our school leaders face. The conclusion that I've come to is that we need to encourage school leaders to step into a space in which they see themselves as place leaders and place makers, whose job it is to help make belonging work for pupils from many, many different backgrounds, and whose aspiration is to create schools that are places of belonging, joyful and inquiring places where children and young people can thrive, can be and become their best possible selves. Now, some of my MA students are here and they know this. We do a session sometimes. You may remember this at the beginning of the last module. And I call it Build Yourself a Leader, right? You have to build the leader that you want. So we're going to do a little bit of building the leader bit now. Okay, so let's go back to the Centre for High Performance. So there they were, critical of the surgeon leader. What did they put forward instead? Well, they concluded the most effective leaders were what they call architects. And I know that some colleagues from the Bartlett School of Architecture are listening to this at the moment, so that's a positive one for them. So leaders who are architects get teachers on board, grow their school, improve teaching. So that's one little bit of the jigsaw, the architect bit. Second bit, some of you will know the very diverting book, Why Should Anybody Be Led by You? By Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones. They point to the social nature of leadership, the importance of authenticity. And my colleague, Rosemary Campbell-Stevenson, now leading the Leadership College in Jamaica, has been pushing that one for many years. Authenticity is understanding your own past and also the importance of the heritages and experiences of others. So authenticity is another bit we need to add to the jigsaw. Another absolutely critical ingredient, and I've thought this for some time before various elections happened around the world, is trust. And leveraging your leadership to build trust. Trustful schools for young people and communities, as writers such as Anthony Bryken, Barbara Schneider, and Karen Seashaw Lewis have argued for some time. So for me, let's start on this. Place leaders are architects, they're authentic, and they build trust. And there's a bit more to it than that, because here's something about the schools that they are creating. So we've got the authentic, the architects, the authentic, and they build trust. But what they also do is they see people for who they are. They understand that each person stands on common yet different ground, as the Celtic writer John O'Donoghue has said. And they walk their leadership with a strong moral imperative, as writers such as Thomas Sergioviani and John West Burnham have been arguing for some time. Being a place leader is about striving to reach beneath the surface and envisaging what might be. It's about passion, it's about commitment, and it's about creating spaces where people can be themselves. Now, this is not just a pipe dream. Research in the States, led by my friend and colleague Karen Seashaw Lewis and colleagues, is actually showing that this form of leadership, the caring, the involving leadership, actually has huge payoffs in terms of results. Leading for place and belonging is not some random act. It's not just sitting around and being nice and wearing a daisy chain. It's about being purposeful. It's about being focused. And it's about seeing schools through the prism of place and belonging. And it's about having a theory of action which recognizes the power of belonging. and it's about recognizing that you don't walk the leadership on your own. When we were completing the research, or the recent research that we finished with London Schools, that is in, I should plug my new book, I've got this new book coming out this year, then one of my colleagues, Rhoda Furness, commented as such, and I think this is so wonderful, as a comment about schools. Just thinking about all the people in the school, if they all, the teachers, the staff, the parents, began to think about schools in this different way. Wow, a place where I can be, where I can go, where I can be myself, where I can contribute, where I can be heard. What a dynamic, wonderful place that would be. This is possible. And if you want to see Rhoda in action, then you'll see her on video 5 in our last video. This is not, as I said, some pipe dream. This is something that has an urgency and an immediacy. Because if we look at the global issues and what's going on, we can't afford to wait. We need to be encouraging leaders to step into a new leadership space. There is an urgency about telling the story of schools in a different way, talking about what is possible, not all the failures and all the problems. I can do that. I'm a professor of urban education. I can write you anything you want about the problems, but actually, that won't take us forward. We have to be thinking about the possibilities, reclaiming the notion of schools as places of hope and possibility. For me, this is what I call the art of possibilities, creating vibrant school communities, joyful and inquiring places in which children and young people feel rooted and can be and become their best possible selves. For what we, everybody here in this room, everybody logged in, what we do today as educators will help shape the future. What we do in our thinking and how we work with young people will shape their future. Whether we're encouraging them not just to read the word, but to read the world, as Paulo Freire talks about. These are the really important things. These are the things that will keep our children and young people safe and enable them to create a world of possibilities in which truth and justice and care of our planet and for the well-being of others will prevail. I'm going to end this presentation with a short video clip, and it is very short. And the video clip is from the project that I've just completed. And the person talking is one of the principals that I've been working with. Her name is Jo Dibb, and she's the principal of Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School, which is probably about 2 miles from here. And she is talking about why her school became involved in the project that we've just finished. And I think when you listen, it's only a 1-minute clip, her comments answer 2 questions. How as a leader, can you help your school to find answers to that number 1 question? Is our school a place where everybody feels they belong? And if not, what we're going to do about it? And the second question of what kind of leaders do we need? So let's get to hearing Jo now.
Our girls, the notion of place and belonging is incredibly important, and even more so in this time when we're all getting a bit exercised about British values and what it means to be part of a community and how we contribute to a community. Working your way through that is quite a complex process. We're trying to help our girls find their own identity. We're trying to find ways in which we can relate on a much more meaningful level with communities. School becomes an agent of change in the community, and the community itself becomes an agent of change within the school. And the girls are representative of that community, so they are in this research and participating about it. They're not only benefiting themselves, but they're actually benefiting the school.
So Jo's actual words, quote, schools become an agent of community and the community itself becomes an agent of change within the school. The girls are representative of that community. To me, that is agency in action. So I'm just going to finish with one final comment. I think we have to, in this difficult world, we have to focus on the children and young people in our school. We have to think about them as our rays of sunlight for the future. They are our future thinkers, enablers, creators, and as educators, we're really privileged to have the opportunity to work with them. Secondly, we have to think about the potential of leadership. Leadership can and should be a celebration of possibilities. And when we're thinking about the leaders that we really need in our school, we have to think about leaders who will shine a light on the road ahead. These are the leaders that we need, and I think that's not just here in the UK. I can see people nodding here. I think that form of leadership travels to many different parts of the globe. So thank you for your attention to that presentation, and I now very much look forward to some questions. Oh, here's the plug, because I forgot to make the plug for my book, which you're supposed to do. So here it is on the screen. Place Belonging in School Leadership, Researching to Make the Difference, and I'm told by Bloomsbury it will be out in June. Website, The Art of Possibilities, and then I do a blog as well. So any of those things, and join in. So now, do we have questions here? And we have questions online. How does this happen?
Yes, first of all, though, I think we need to thank Professor Riley.
Thank you.
And yes, we have time for questions. It'd be better if we have perhaps a couple together. So do we have any burning questions that people want to... Yes, over there.
See, the thing is about this leaders, that it's the leadership. You see, it's not just the individual. I used that film clip because I wanted you to hear how the important issues can be articulated by leaders, so for not me to speaking about them in that way. I am absolutely convinced that the leaders are there in the system, and that leaders will come forward when they don't see that they have to be the superhero, when they see that it's about how you build community, how you bring people together. So when I go into school, and I go into school, I work with real children in real classrooms, in all kinds of different ways. And so it's encouraging people in the system to feel that there is a different form of leadership. Because if you talk to people, and I've been doing this recently in a different project, and you say, you know, it's really good people, oh, do you know, want to be, oh God, no, I don't want to be a head. I don't want to be that kind of head who is just, you know, the authoritarian, hectoring person. That's not how I see it. So I think you have to show that there is a different way of doing it, and that it isn't an individual kind of way. So this is why you have to start talking differently, so that different people will step into the leadership space. But this is not a one-person show. And the only other thing I would say is that working in schools, like working as we've been doing on research in this way with teachers, children, leaders, you know, I'm going to use the word fun. It's such good fun. People really enjoy it. So you have to create this sense of enjoyment and working together. And I think that's actually how we do it. So by promoting a very different way of leading, I think, in short, is the answer to your question.
Thank you. Another question there, and then...
Hi.
Hello. In the days of academisation, how would you advise existing school leaders who do buy into this philosophy to stand firm and withhold external pressures to really be driven by results, etc.?
Some years ago, there was some of you, because I've been around a long time in lots of lives, as it were, there was a thing called the London Challenge. Some of you may remember that. Okay. And really, that London Challenge, so I was just one of many people involved in that wonderful jigsaw, was about changing expectations and views of what could be. And the most wonderful thing about it was the collaboration between things. So I had a project as part of the London Challenge where we were working with young people who were on the margins of school, likely to be excluded. We said to schools, send your kids who you think you might exclude. So it became popular in that kind of way. We did a a booklet with the children, co-wrote it. Title, When You Feel Good, You Learn Well. When you feel good, you learn well. So the evidence for me, look at the work they're doing in the States about these forms of leadership, Karen Seashaw Lewis and others. Look at the schools here. Look at Elizabeth Garrett Anderson, and I put Jo in. Jo's not one who usually takes the limelight. She'll probably be quite embarrassed that I've used that. I mean, she knew we had the video. It's a different way of leading. So schools are doing really well. When you feel good, you learn well. So you get the results as well, but those results stay with you. So it's actually having confidence, and again, not feeling that you do this on your own. So it's working with the children, it's working with the teachers, it's working with the parents and the communities. It's talking the talk. How can we as a community do this? It is possible. You see, and I think, I used to talk about it's possible. I'm now, with everything going in the world, I'm saying it's an imperative. We can't sit around and say, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if people started doing this differently? I'm saying, whoa, look what's going on in the world. Let's not mess about. Let's actually focus on what we're doing in schools. What is the purpose of schools? How we are enabling our teachers to be great teachers. How we can encourage children to feel that they have a sense of agency in their own school, and they have a sense of agency in school. They're going to think they have a sense of agency in the world. This is an imperative. It's not a wouldn't it be nice thing.
Any more questions? I saw a hand here. Microphone on its way to you, I think. And then there. Oh. Sorry.
I think it's a really difficult question, that, because you like to say, well, it would be great if, I made that passing comment about the budget. Just imagine if, I'm trying not to do a party political thing, but, if somebody said, we're making this budget, and you know what we're doing? We're thinking about the children, and they're our future, and we're going to invest in them in every kind of way. Wouldn't that be fantastic? But that is not a reality at the moment. So the incentive, I think, is about values and beliefs. I think it's an incentive about people working together. And to be honest, the other thing is, it's an incentive about joy and fulfillment, and that schools are great places. It is much better, and I taught in some very challenging schools, if everybody is really working to get along with each other. So actually saying, if you work in this way, if you involve children in researching about place and belonging, and they come up with some ideas about behaviour and how we should change it, wow, that improves the school. If you involve teachers in this way, when we work with the newly qualified teachers to begin with, they're going, oh my goodness, this is our first year of teaching, we've got to do this, we've got to do that. And I'm going, trust me. What you have to do is go in your classroom, work out the children in front of you, who are the insiders and who are the outsiders. All you have to do to start with, okay? You do that, and then you decide what you're going to do about it. And these newly qualified teachers they're just flying in their schools. So it's not simple, but these are all the elements, and it's a different way of talking. And I say it's not the daisy chain, oh gosh, let's all skip round together. This is based on a reality of how you can make schools great places, how you can get the exam results, but how young people can feel that what they do and say makes a difference in a school, and then they're going to change the world. Because you know what? If we have the children in our schools and they don't think they can change the world, it's pretty sad, isn't it? So that's why we have to focus differently. And I think we have to just talk a very, very, very different talk. And that's why I talk about the art of possibilities.
I think we have time for one very quick question and perhaps one quick answer as well, but you were next in the queue.
I was just thinking about how you create the political pressure to allow people to explore these opportunities. And I'm sorry, I'm not in education, so I don't know, but the people who've left teaching professions so early after they've qualified, presumably lack of leadership or the right leadership features very strongly in their reasons for leaving?
I think what research is showing, what my own experience shows, it's partly lack of leadership, I mentioned the word agency because I really think that it's incredibly important. It's the whole thing. If we think that what we do makes a difference, even if it's tough, we're much more likely to continue doing it, aren't we? I mean, this is logic. This is human nature. So one of the things I think sometimes with newish youngest teachers, they don't feel they have a sense of agency, okay? There are all sorts of government demands, so they feel they haven't got agency there. But if they don't have that sense of agency within their own school, then why should you stay when it's hard work? It's wonderful, but it's actually really, really hard work. So in terms of agency, this is why it's so critical. So it's the agency of the principals themselves to realize what they can do, but it's a shared agency. That goes back to your thing. This is not an individual thing. It's what you do to create the agency in young people, to create the agency in teachers, and so on. One of the groups that we worked with on this project, one of the groups of children, young people, they were all, it's in a school, Corelli School, young children, young people from all over the world. They wanted to know how good is our school at creating a sense of belonging. So we set up a research group, young people, our student researchers. They were all recent arrivals to the UK. You can see them on video too. And they researched how good is our school at welcoming newcomers. Now, those young people are amazing. They invited me last year to a big conference because they're going around the country talking about what they do. They have developed a welcome book and they've translated it into 13 languages. Incredible agency. And again, if you look at one of the videos, look at the agency of the teachers themselves. If you're a first-year teacher and through your research, your school changes how the playground is organized, you feel pretty good about yourself. So these are the very practical things that can actually create a very different way of doing things. And it is fun, it's enjoyable. When you talk about schools being places of joy and wonder, people look at you in a very peculiar way, but they should be. They should be places of joy and wonder, and they can be.
Thank you very much. Well, that about wraps it up, I think. So thank you for coming. Thank you for your excellent questions. And thank you once again to Professor Catherine Riley.